welcome to the Design Rescue Show, where we take a behind-the-scenes look at the unique journeys of creative professionals, and we learn about the choices they've made that have shaped their career paths. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. I am your host, David Block, and joining me today is brand consultant and host of a design education channel on YouTube, covering a wide range of design topics from design trends to career tips and much more. It's Philip VanDusen. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, David. Appreciate being on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So this show is basically kind of a behind the scenes tour of your career journey. And so, I'd like to kick things off just by asking you if you could give us a little bit of background about how you first realized that design was a career direction that you wanted to pursue.
Yeah. My career journey has not been very linear. It's definitely been more like a web than a ladder. And so I actually started as a fine artist and practiced fine art up until my 30s, getting my master's degree in order to teach, and then found it very difficult to find full-time teaching work at the time. And I started a t-shirt business, graphic design, graphic t-shirt business, and started selling things at street fairs and around to boutiques in New York City. And I eventually closed my own business and joined another like $5 million small graphic t-shirt company in Brooklyn. And I became a graphic designer there, learned the Macintosh. I actually lied to get my first job. I said I knew the Mac and I didn't.
Yeah.
And I started doing graphic design for t-shirts and working the Mac and doing catalogs and things like that. And that's really when I discovered that graphic design was something that I really liked. I totally came at it through the back door, through the apparel industry. I wasn't ever trained in graphic design. I have my master's degree in painting, and I've learned absolutely everything that I've learned in my career on the job. And so I worked in that graphic t-shirt business for about 4 or 5 years. I eventually moved my way up to being an art director, overseeing 3 or 4 people. And then I went to work for a larger licensing graphic t-shirt company that did a lot of things with Looney Tunes and NBA and all the CLC college sports and things like that. And then I eventually made a jump over to Old Navy right when they were starting up, and went in as a senior graphic designer, and then left about 11 years later as a vice president of graphic design, graphic design, color, trend, packaging, and CAD textile design, and overseeing about 65 people. Wow. And so I came up through the apparel industry and realized that managing creatives was a lot like teaching, except, you made a lot more money, and you weren't out of work every 9 months. And then I made the jump over to the agency side, eventually made the jump back over to the client side, and then I made a jump out on my own. So I'm abbreviating, and you can ask me anything you want a little more clarity on.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. Well, what I'd like to do is just take just a step backwards a little bit to back to your education. I know that you went to the Kansas City Art Institute, right? And so what program did you enroll in there?
Yeah, I came in as, you do foundations as a freshman, and they give you a kind of a taste of everything. And then I went into the painting department and learned painting and drawing. In my sophomore year, I actually switched majors over to ceramics, and I did a lot of 3D kind of building in ceramics, and learned how to throw pots and stuff like that. And then I went back over to the painting side, and I graduated with my BFA in painting.
Okay. All right. So moving on just a little bit to your role at Old Navy. So you, as you said, you were the vice president of graphics and packaging at Old Navy. And I'm curious if you could talk about 1 or 2 of the projects that you worked on, your favorite projects, and how you made sure that the creative vision kind of aligned with the business goals of the company.
Yeah. Well, I have 2 kind of favorite projects. One I did there was we did it every year, was the Old Navy 4th of July flag tee. Mm-hmm. and it was an American flag on a t-shirt. And the first time we did it, it was wildly successful, and we kept doing it year after year. The year 2000 t-shirt was, to my understanding, the biggest selling graphic tee in history. We sold over 3.5 million of them that year, and one out of every 300 people in the United States bought one.
Wow.
We actually had to buy cotton futures in order to get enough cotton to produce the t-shirts for that year, which was pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was really fun, because we were always challenged with, like, okay, how are we going to do the flag this year? Because we knew they were going to sell millions and millions of copies. And so just coming up with something that was unique, but within those very, very strict parameters of the simplicity of, what the design was.
Right.
It was sometimes having really, really tight parameters or rules that you have to follow in a project actually makes you be more inventive and more creative. So I think that that's one of the projects that I really liked, because it was wildly successful financially,
Right.
and for the company. Also, I still see those flag tees walking around in people's chests. So it's always great to see your work in the real life. And then my other project at Old Navy was when I actually was relocated out to San Francisco. We moved product development from New York to San Francisco. And when I went out there, I was kind of gifted the packaging department as kind of a carrot, the end of the stick to get me to move out there. And at the time, all of Old Navy's packaging was super generic. It was like, white cardstock with like the blue oval Old Navy logo on it. It was just kind of no personality. And at the time, brands like Abercrombie and Fitch and Hollister were coming up, and they had a tremendous amount of energy and great retail experience, and they were now our competitors. So we decided to redo all of the packaging in the Old Navy store in about 9 months. And that was over 2,000 designs. And we basically created designs for shops. So we had the men's athletic shop was a look, the men's, kind of ready biz cash section was a shop, the men's jeans section was a shop. All of the graphic designs for the packaging and the tags and the hang tags and stuff were all designed with a real kind of personality for that particular shop. And we did that across the entire thing, all women's, girls, boys, etc. So it was a tremendous amount of work, but we also had to come up with these graphic concepts, which were going to live on for a period of time within each one of these shops and give them a personality. And that was really an exciting and fun project.
That's amazing. So now I'm curious if you had to deal with regional or cultural, issues when dealing with that. Is it just you deal with just coming up with the packaging, or do you have to deal with how do you think about how that packaging is going to affect people in different regions across the country?
Well, no. We of course we thought about it, but we didn't do regional designs. I mean, the interesting thing, when I was in that much smaller t-shirt company when I was just starting off, we did a lot of regional designs. We did a lot of designs that were for the tourist and entertainment industry, where we would do what's called name drops, which is basically you have the similar design, but that you inject the name of that particular place, Sanibel Island or Miami or Key West or whatever that is. And that was regionalizing our work. But in Old Navy, not really. We didn't really do anything that was regional specific. And Old Navy wasn't international. Old Navy is owned by the Gap, and Gap, of course, is international, and they have to take into consideration international sizing and international styles, etc. But Old Navy was just an American brand at the time, and so we didn't really take that into consideration much. When I got into CPG, consumer packaged goods, that regionalizing and those sorts of considerations took a much more prominent seat in terms of what I had to pay attention to.
I see. Okay. Changing gears just a little bit, moving forward in time to your time with as an executive creative director at Anthem and then Landor. Which one were you at first? Let's talk about Anthem and Landor.
Yeah, I left Old Navy. They had a restructuring, and my position was eliminated. And after 11 years, I kind of found myself on the street, and that was kind of a shock to the system, having just moved out to California about a year previous. But what it allowed me to do was it allowed me to leverage my experience, having done packaging, to move over to the agency side of the business. In that interim period, I actually did a continuing education program at Harvard called Business Perspectives for Creative Leaders, which is a lot of senior level creative people who go to Harvard and go through essentially a kind of abbreviated 10-day version of um, their business degree kind of curriculum. And it was absolutely fascinating. And I made some amazing connections there. And I actually met a guy who owned Anthem and was in the middle of his buyout. He was about to leave the company, and he was looking for an executive creative director. And so he said, when we get back to San Fran, you should come see me. And so I did. And I ended up going into Anthem as a ECD. And it was we did a lot of brand strategy, a lot of consumer packaged goods, a lot of brand identity for packaged goods, et cetera. And it was just an amazing kind of experience, jumping over from the fashion, 15 years in the fashion industry over to the agency side, because I'd been working with, one single brand for 11 years. And now suddenly I had, at any one time, 5 or 6 different client projects on the table. And we were working with very big clients. Safeway was a cornerstone client of ours, but we also worked with Disney and Avery, and it was an amazing experience because I was working with a whole range of different clients. And the great thing about working in the agency side is you get a lot of variety. And whenever you get a new client or a new project, you have to kind of dive in and learn a whole lot about that particular industry, which is something that I find really fascinating.
Right. Yeah. Amazing. Okay. Has your creative process changed at all from that time over the years?
Yeah. It's funny. When I was in the fashion industry, there was a creative process that was very trend focused, because it is the fashion industry. And that's actually where I learned my ability to kind of spot and organize trends. And on my YouTube channel, as you mentioned before we started up, I do an annual trend video, which is generally my most popular video of the year, and is shared widely across classrooms and universities in the country, I'm told, in the world. But that's where and how I learned to do trend spotting. And so we would shop, stores around the world, Tokyo, Berlin, Milan, in London, et cetera, and look for trends in graphic design, and then come back and translate those into our graphic apparel and our textile designs and our packaging, et cetera. And that was a process that was very kind of, you go out, you see what's in the market, you get inspired, you come back and you develop your own collections. And we were generally working a year in advance. So if it was spring, we were working on the spring for the next year. And so there was a lot of projection that we had to do, a lot of translation to where we thought things might be going. In the CPG industry, or in the client, the agency side, you're dealing with, you're getting a project that could very well be on the shelf in a year, but you're dealing with looking at that particular category of industry in that market right now. And the process is much less kind of seat of your pants impression and much more strategically driven.
Right.
And so that was a huge shift for me. When I went from the fashion industry into the agency side, I knew nothing about brand strategy. I knew nothing about packaging development for for mass retail.
Right.
At Old Navy, I was developing packaging, but it was for our store. We had no other competition next to us, right? It was a closed environment. But when you go into consumer packaged goods in the real world, your package is sitting in an aisle next to 150 other brands, and you have to take all of that into consideration. And you also have to take the buyer, the purchaser, the customer avatar into consideration. And so the process on the agency side was filled with so much more rigor in terms of methodology than I had ever experienced before. And diving in there and learning that at a very senior level, very somewhat late in my career, was fascinating. And it really energized me and kind of propelled me forward for the next decade as I worked with other agencies and other client-side companies.
If you're enjoying this video, please take a moment to hit that like button, leave a comment below, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss our future videos. Thank you. Okay, great. And then moving on from your time at Anthem and Landor, after that you were working at you worked at PepsiCo as vice president of head of design for global snacks.
That's correct.
Which sounds like an amazing position. I'd love to hear, first of all, what did you do in that position?
Sure. I oversaw all design for salty snacks for everything that Pepsi owned globally. So one of my biggest brands was the biggest food brand in the world, which is Lay's potato chips. Lay's potato chips is in 50 countries around the world. And talk about regional flavors and ways of presenting and ways of designing. That was something that was it was a very, very high profile, very financially impactful brand for PepsiCo. And so that was kind of the mothership in my job, was Lay's potato chips. But we also were managing Doritos and Fritos and Cheetos and Sun Chips and all of those other good for you foods that we all know and love. And I've always been a salty snack guy. So I was in, hog heaven doing it. And a lot of those brands are really, really fun brands. Doritos is an awesome and fun brand. Cheetos is a super fun brand. And I was managing, I had been brought in by a guy named Mauro Porcini, who's got famous at 3M and is now, we were kind of brought in to build design as a competency inside of PepsiCo. PepsiCo had never had an internal design group. And when I went in there, that's what we were building. So I was brought in very early on in that process. And we were working with a lot of external agencies. So we weren't actually developing a lot of that creative in-house. We were actually leveraging outside agencies. And that's one of the reasons why I was brought in, because I'd been on both the client side and the agency side. And I knew how both of those worked.
Right.
And when I talk to young designers who are coming up, a lot of the times I recommend that they do that, because in my career anyway, it's been an incredible superpower and strength that's enabled me to leverage getting very nice positions in companies, because companies value people who've had that kind of both sides of the street experience.
Right. Absolutely. And so in that position, of course, you mentioned a little bit about dealing with regional design issues as well. You know what? Forgive me. I'm going to switch gears. I have a different question to ask on that.
Well, I'm going to ask you a question first.
Yes, go right ahead.
All right, David. This is my quiz question that I ask some people about Lay's potato chips, and it has to do with your regional train of thought. Okay, so you know that they do, the Lay's kind of do us a flavor campaign every year where they ask users to design a flavor. And, they had one that was like biscuits and gravy, and they've had other ones like sriracha and stuff. Anyway, super fun flavors.
Right.
But in Lay's potato chips is in 50 countries around the world, and they have a whole lot of different flavors, right? What is the most popular, most highly sold flavor of Lay's potato chips in the world? That's my question.
Oh, wow. I'll be quite honest. I don't have anything to base it on because I haven't done my research, but I can tell you that from my personal experience, I would guess it's not just the regular salt, right? Or something like that. Probably something along the lines of one of the hot ones. One of the
yeah. Most people answer salt and vinegar because of the whole like European thing. The most popular flavor of Lay's potato chips in the world is prawn.
Prawn,
shrimp flavored, because of China and Asia and the volume of those sales. And going into that job, I had no idea that Lay's potato chips even had prawns as a flavor. But yeah, so there you go, regional design.
Wow, that is wild. Prawn. Is it available in the United States?
I've never seen it sold in the United States, but
Wow.
who knows? It might be in like some specialty Asian markets, because there are like some Chinese grocery stores that are nothing but, Asian products. But
Right.
I've never seen it. I've never seen it here.
Well, you know that
And
I'm
they're
going.
good, but they're
Yeah.
good. I have tasted it.
That's awesome. Well, I will look for prawn for sure.
There you go.
And I'd like to actually jump a little bit forward to your Verohl brand design for your company. I'd like to talk about that. First of all, what sparked your idea to start Verohl brand design? And could you talk about what services that you offer?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, when I left PepsiCo, I just kind of burned out, to be honest with you. I'd been working for other people, agencies, companies for 25 years, and I just kind of decided it was time for me to strike out on my own. And so I started, and I also I'd also been working with the Fortune 100 forever. So I've been working with really big matrixed organizations. I didn't have anything to prove. I've been working with Coca-Cola and P&G and just about in Chevron and every major company that you can imagine. I've worked with, and they all move glacially slow, and the projects are filled with 75 people, and they're incredibly complex. And I kind of been there and done that, and I wanted to work with entrepreneurs and small to medium sized businesses and startups and people who I could help with the sort of branding methodology and rigor that I had used with these really large companies, but scale it down to the point where I could use some of the same tools but have a much more major impact that could really move the ball forward for these smaller companies. And it's processes that they wouldn't usually be able to afford. And I wanted to be able to have an impact on these businesses very quickly. And so that's kind of why I struck out on my own. And I also, when I was at both Landor and PepsiCo, I realized there was a real tectonic shift going on in the creative industries. We had external, that was both client side and agency side, but a lot of companies were downsizing their internal departments and using outside firms, consultancies, small 5-8 person digital and virtual agencies that had no brick and mortar. They were consultancies, and they were, winning very large projects or being handed very large projects. And so there was a real shift into, the consulting economy that was happening at that time. And I decided when I went on my own that I really wanted to leverage that, and I wanted to be on the right side of history, so to speak. And so I opened a consultancy where I reached out to about 8 or 10 very senior level partners that I've had in my career. And I said, hey, depending on what project I bring in, would you like to work some projects with me and kind of white label your services under my agency? And they said, yeah, absolutely. So I build teams depending on the project that I get. I have strategy people, I have copywriting people, I have web development people, I have user research people. And depending on the project that I bring in, I build a very specific team for that, and we work the project, and then we kind of go off on my own. So I'm a one-person agency with a small virtual marketing team.
Right.
But that's how I stay nimble. That's how I deliver really, really high level quality strategic work at a relatively a reasonable cost in comparison to when you're talking a big global agency.
Yeah.
And I get to work with, companies that are moving and shaking a lot faster than some of the big kahunas.
Your projects, Bonfire and Brand Strategy 101, are those part of Verohl, or is that a separate entity? Are you starting these courses on your own as part of your YouTube channel, or how can you talk a little bit about that?
How does that whole ecosystem work? Yeah, it's a very kind of complicated conglomerate that I've built. And just to give your listeners an idea of kind of the progress of that, was that when I went out on my own, I'd never sold before. Like I'd always worked at companies where the clients came to you. You didn't have to do any advertising. You know, I was never a sales guy, a marketing guy. And so when I started my own agency, I was like, hey, I got to get some clients. And this new thing called content marketing had come around. And so I decided I started a new newsletter. I ran that for about 6 months and built an email list. And then I started a YouTube channel because I figured that if I just put everything I know out into the world, people will see that I know what I'm talking about and clients will come to me. And that's what I did. I decided to share everything I knew about branding, strategy, business development, and on YouTube for free and see what happened, see if it got me any clients. And the funny thing is, it did. Within about a year, 80% of my clients were coming to me directly from YouTube. And so it was a very, very important channel for me. And I've continued to do YouTube. I think I'm now in about my 7th year and I've got more than 500 videos up. And it continues to drive 80%, if not more, of my clients to me. So content marketing has been very good to me. And so I've been doing agency work, brand strategy, brand identity, website design, etc. And then in doing all that YouTube content, my initial intent was to share things that businesses needed to know or should learn or come to value for their own businesses. But what happened is that I ended up kind of building a whole audience of creative professionals and graphic designers and freelancers and small agencies who were following my work and valuing what I was sharing and teaching. And so about 3 years ago, I decided to launch a course, and I built a course called Brand Strategy 101. And if you're curious, you can go to philipvandusen.com/BS101 and read more about it. And so it's an intro level course to teach any graphic designer who's got 5 or more years of experience how to dive into the world of brand strategy. And it gives you all the tools and the techniques and the hacks and all the processes. And so I built that for my creative professional audience. And then after I did that, the response was really great. And I got a lot more kind of inquiries about masterminds. I had started off when I first started off in my entrepreneurial journey. I joined a mastermind group, and I'd never known anything about mastermind groups, and it was incredibly impactful for me in accelerating my growth as a digital entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
And so I decided that I really wanted to launch a mastermind group of my own. So I did that, and I called it the Brand Design Masters Guild. I decided to do it kind of as an MVP, minimum viable product, and I launched a 12-week mastermind group and had 10 people in it. So it was very tight, intimate, and it went off amazingly well and people loved it. And I actually did that concept 4 more times. And so I ran the guild for about 2 years in those 12-week cycles. And at the end of that, I realized that I really wanted to do something that didn't end after 12 weeks. And I wanted to start a mastermind community that could go on and have a home base, a digital home base. And I could develop a lot of resources and tools and trainings inside of that community. And so I built Bonfire. And Bonfire is a mastermind community for creative professionals who are established and have 5+ years of experience or are mid-career and looking at a pivot point, either going from agency to in-house or in-house to agency, or either of those to being freelance and independent, or they're late in their career and they're figuring out how they can start building a personal brand after working, in-house for forever.
Right.
And so it's that community has become kind of more important to me. And to be honest with you, I'm actually sunsetting a lot of my client work now. And I'm looking on focusing almost entirely on coaching and course building and running the Bonfire community.
Outstanding. Wow. Now, how many do you have the Bonfire running right now? And how many people are currently members of Bonfire?
The membership is growing. We just started actually about 3 months ago, but I've got a few over 20, I think. But there's a number of levels inside. There's a guild level, which is a more, it's a higher investment tier. And so there's a base level, there's a bonfire level, and then I also have kind of a mentorship level where you can work with me directly. And as I said, the community's just launched, but it's going really well, and people inside of it are completely loving it. And we just can't. I sell memberships on a quarterly basis, and everyone who joined at the beginning just re-upped. So my churn rate is 0, which is pretty amazing when it comes to communities. And I've actually had a few members who came in at the base bonfire ember level. We call it embers instead of members. Get it right?
Got it.
Embers. And they came in at the ember level, and they've they've moved up the chain to the guild level, which is a higher level of experience.
Outstanding. All right. Well, first of all, once again, thank you for being on my show. We've made it right to the very end. I've got one question left for you, and that has to do with advice for aspiring creatives. And I'm curious, based on your extensive experience in the industry, what sort of advice would you give young creatives, whether they're coming out of high school, coming out of college? What would you say to them going into the industry? And those that are interested in brand design, brand strategy, do you have any advice for those people?
Yeah, well, my advice would be get as much experience as you can in as broad in as many ways as you can. I try not to get too locked into one particular path too early. I mean, it's a good idea to get 2 or 3 years of experience in one thing before you make a jump over to something else. But having experience on both the agency side and the client side, to me, has been incredibly valuable. So I would recommend that to anybody. One of the ways you can do that with actually, you can date before you get married, is to work with a placement agency. And there's a number of agencies. Creative Circle, Aquint is a great international agency, and you can use them to place you for temporary positions. It could be a week, could be a day, could be 6 weeks in different companies. And the cool thing about that is you get to experience the environment, the vibe, the work of different sorts of agencies and companies in kind of short bite-sized pieces at the beginning of your career, and really get a sense of like where you feel comfortable or the kind of work that you really like doing. It's also a great way to build a very diverse portfolio very early on in your career. And so I highly recommend people who are just getting out of school to possibly start working with a placement agency in the beginning, because otherwise you're going to take a job, an intro level job, and you're going to have to stay in that one position for 3 years. And I can't tell you how many people that I've known who've, come out of that 3 years and said, yeah, I worked at this agency for 3 years and now I have a portfolio that's full of nothing but ever-ready batteries, right? That's all I have is ever-ready batteries.
Right.
And so, and that's a tough thing to try to figure out. And so if you start by temping a little bit, you can get a smattering of different sorts of design and different sorts of experiences. So don't get married too soon. That's the overarching umbrella advice that I have. And the other advice I have is follow your curiosity and don't pressure yourself so much. Just kind of try to breathe. It's a process. It's going to take a while. I didn't start in graphic design till I was 32 years old. And by the time I was 45, I was a vice president in a global corporation. So it can be done, and don't freak out if you're starting a little late. Just get in there and follow your curiosity. And the other thing I would say, I know I have a lot of advice, is that there is more educational material available online for absolute free than there ever has been in the history of the world. And if you didn't spend a penny going to school, you could literally learn graphic design and brand strategy from free resources that are out there right now. Right. So there's no excuse that you have for not educating yourself. And that's it.
Yeah, excellent. That's actually, I want to back you up a little bit on on the age the temping part of that. That's actually how I started my career. I, just like you, I started a little bit late. I actually got my degree when I was 33, and I went right to a temp agency, and I was placed at Experian as a designer. Within 6 months, they hired me as a senior designer, and I was there for 5 years, and had a great time, really, really great time working on the Experian team. So yeah, temping is definitely, I highly recommend it to get that a wider range of experience and sort of touch into different areas of the industry and see where you may want to end up. Absolutely. And by the way, I will make sure that the links to your programs and your courses are in the description. I'll make sure that's available for everybody.
Can I mention Bonfire? If anyone wants to learn more about Bonfire, just go to philipvandusen.com/bonfire, and it'll take you to a page where you can learn all about it and see some videos of people who've been in it. And we'd love to have you there.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you so much. Once again, I appreciate your time, and this has been a great conversation. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, David. I appreciate you having me on the show.